millions of us are under these increased restrictions, including Greater Manchester, but lots of other parts of the UK too. Are they actually working?
Good morning, Sophie. Yeah, so we looked at an analysis looking at countries across the world, and one of the things that came out clearly is suppression does not have to mean lockdown. In fact, the three things that countries did to try to bring their numbers down while protecting their economies and protecting society and schools were testing, tracing, isolating, so a very active and robust public health infrastructure. The second was strict border restrictions on movement, so you don't have people going and coming and actually reseeding the infection. And the third was having good voluntary compliance with guidance through having very clear messaging. So that messaging would be avoid crowded places. If you're inside, use a face covering, get outside as much as possible because the virus transmits less outside. So I think perhaps one of the mistakes has been to think the only way to suppress this virus is through lockdowns, which have major economic consequences as well as for general, societal relations.
That's interesting about other ways of suppressing the virus other than a lockdown. Do you think that there's a risk that we're starting to see a bit of COVID fatigue, that the reason that some cases are going up in places which have still got these restrictions is because people simply aren't following the rules anymore?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think a large majority of people are still following the rules, but of course fatigue is setting in. I mean, the pandemic has been raging across the world for 9 months, 6 months of lockdown in the UK. And I guess people just want to know, what's the strategy? What's the game plan? Where are we going with this? And when is my life going to get back to how it somewhat used to be? And I think that's where, local lockdowns have a role to play if there's actually a strategy behind them. So they were used, for example, in Australia or in Vietnam or in New Zealand for just 1 or 2 weeks or a few weeks to crush the curve, basically to get rid of the virus. And that was the aim you were heading towards. You could tell people it's going to be a few weeks. We're going to do the testing and tracing. We're going to try to catch all the cases. We're going to put in the border restrictions. We don't have it reseated. And then you get your normal life back. So I think the longer this stretches on, the worse it's actually going to be for the economy, because it's kind of like slow strangulation. So if you don't solve your public health problem, you're not going to be able to solve your economic issues either.
I'm keen to ask you about the spike of cases that was recorded yesterday because of a technical issue. Over 12,000, a record number of cases reported. Brandon Lewis just said that actually it just shows how transparent the government is with the data. Do you agree with him, or do you think that it points to problems with the way data is collected and recorded in the UK?
Well, I think the data has always been challenging, because if you actually want to know where your pandemic is heading, where the outbreak is, you actually need other pieces of data than cases. You need to know how much testing is being done. What is your testing positivity, the number of people testing positive, so you have an idea if you're testing enough. You also need to know how many are linked to clusters. So when I look, for example, at Scottish data, one of my first questions is how many are tied to existing clusters that we know about, and is there actually the testing and tracing to be able to contain those outbreaks, or is this being spread throughout the community? And so I think also this reflects that a lot of those results from yesterday were backdated, and that means your tracing is not going to work rapidly enough, because for the test, trace, isolate system to work, test results have to be returned within 24 hours. Tracing has to be done and be over 80% in terms of catching contacts. And you actually need people to isolate. And I do wonder if that's where our system is falling down, given a study that showed only 11% of people are actually isolating the 14 days when they're told to that they've been in contact. And so thinking through incentives, what can we do to make it easier for people to comply with isolation, to make it, what are the incentives we can offer to make it so that they actually want to do this, whether it's enhanced sick pay or other ways, because perhaps it doesn't make any difference if you do the testing and the tracing if people don't isolate at the end.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Those kind of compliance rates certainly quite concerning. It feels like we've had so much gloomy news about coronavirus. Every time we come on, we're talking about another, stark statistic or gloomy interview. But there seemed to be a little glimmer of optimism, shall we say, in the latest statistics from the Office of National Statistics, saying that the growth rate in cases appears to be levelling off. I know how cautious we need to be, but are there any reasons to be optimistic?
Well, I think the reasons to be optimistic are there first on the medical side, that we are having, and this is what I guess President Donald Trump's statement shows, that actually we do have, better therapies and better treatments. If we think back, 6 to 9 months ago, this was a new virus. We didn't even have the sequencing for what it was exactly. And now we're having rapid testing. WHO has approved a test kit from South Korea. 140 million are going to be distributed in low and middle income countries. This is an antigen test that gives results within 15 minutes and is seen to be as accurate as our PCR testing. So on testing, we're also doing well. And a number of vaccine candidates, which are advancing through phase 3. We've never had science progress this quickly. So I think that's something that's really positive, and that people can say the time that we've bought has been worthwhile because we're getting better and better solutions as time goes on.
Now, keen to get your opinion, your analysis of Donald Trump as well, from your kind of scientific background. Now, of course, he has COVID-19. We've seen the video where he says that he is beginning to feel better. At the same time, though, he was sent to hospital in a helicopter. He was given a cocktail of antibody drugs, experimental drugs. Because of his age and weight, he is in a higher risk category. How concerned do you think we should be about the president's health?
Well, I think what, President Donald Trump's situation shows, and I do really wish him and his family the best through this time, is that if you get access to early medical treatment with COVID-19, your outcomes are much better. Unfortunately, for 30 million Americans, they don't have access to any kind of health insurance, which means they will not have access to that kind of medical care. We've seen this with COVID-19. In May, a study showed that patients being admitted to UK hospitals, because they were being admitted so late, a third of them were dying. If you compare that to South Korea and Germany, it was under 1%. And German and South Korean doctors said it's because they were giving people intervention early. With mild symptoms, they were being admitted and they were being treated. And we've seen this as well with Ebola. I think people think the case fatality rate is kind of a fixed number, but it depends on the medical care you get. So if you were in West Africa during Ebola and you didn't get any medical care, it was a 70 to 80% chance you would die of this. It was a death sentence. If you were able to be taken to a top medical center in London or in Atlanta, it would drop to probably 20 to 30%. And if you were given experimental therapies, your chance of dying became almost negligible, close to 0%. And so it just shows the differences that actually if you get access to medical care, your outcomes are much better.
Now, of course, when Boris Johnson had COVID, we were told he was in good spirits, like Trump, that he had mild symptoms, like Trump, that he was taken to hospital as a precautionary measure, like Trump. Do you think there are any similarities?
Well, I think if you look at who's actually gotten COVID-19 in terms of leaders, it's been, the heads of Brazil, Bolsonaro, PM of the UK, Johnson, and President of the United States, Trump, which are all leaders who have not really taken COVID-19 seriously at the start and have actually, in a way, gone this line of trying to kind of lift restrictions, trying to keep life going and not dealing with their public health problem. And just to say again, I know there's this move to just lift all restrictions and get normal life back, but just look at the United States. Over 200,000 Americans have died of this. GDP dropped 30% in the second quarter of 2020. 85% of kids are not in-person schooling. And that's what happens if you lift all restrictions. A similar story in Brazil. So I think, we should not be looking at certain countries saying that's the way to do it, whether it's the United States. I think we should be looking at East Asia. And there you actually have seen South Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kong, Singapore. I think if you look there, you see a different kind of leadership, which really treated this like a SARS or MERS event, took it seriously, and actually saved their economies because they just went straight for dealing with their health problem and got the economy back up and running quickly, rather than kind of in this muddled state of not taking it seriously and then ending up in a halfway house, which is unfortunately where the United States is in right now.